Good morning, guys. Happy Republic Day. Good morning, Sumit. Good morning, Tulsi. Happy Republic Day. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Republic Day. Good morning. So, we're doing non state actors. We understood that they're on the same spectrum with one towards advocacy and the other towards empowerment or development. We studied pressure groups. Now we will look at international donors, move our way towards NGOs and self help groups. And while we study international donors, we will also study the FCRA because that's how foreign money comes to India. And we've studied largely non-profits and the overall policy behind non-profits. Correct or not? Does that make sense? So we've done this and we've done this. Today, let us do this and this. So let's start. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Abhinandan. So, first things first, when we are studying international donors, you can use similar points with charities also because both these terms are mentioned in the syllabus. Apart from the internationalization aspect, the larger arguments remain the same. For reference, you can always keep MCN 59 as your base, and you can build on it. Now, let's understand exactly what it is that we're supposed to study. First, let's understand the types. Then, let us understand the methods of funding. Then, let us understand what are the key issues, and then let us understand how can we solve these key issues, keeping in mind how important international donors can be. Okay, so that's the larger idea, to understand exactly what it is and what it is not. Okay, now think of it in this way, that in an increasingly interconnected world, in an increasingly interdependent world, international donors have largely built themselves. They serve as a bridge which connects global solidarity or global concern with local development. Now, the first question that we should have is, why should there be a global concern? Thank you, thank you. Why should there be a global concern for local development? Because historically, the world has always been divided into the oppressors and the oppressed. The world has always been divided into the developed and the developing. today that difference is called the global north and the global south in terms of IR. Global south is no longer a geographical term. Global south today represents countries which have not been able to be as developed as the rest of the world. And that has primarily been due to certain historical and other reasons, right? And India wants to recognize itself as the voice of the global south. Now, it is a very interesting aspect of why should a rich, let me be very casual about this, why should a rich dude sitting in America make a foundation to try and solve, let us say, polio problems in India, or let us say malaria problems in Africa? Let me ask you a very simple question. Why should a rich dude in America be concerned about malaria problems in Africa? Anybody wants to go at it? It is a very, very multi-layered question. You could answer this in paper one, in paper two, paper four, essay, everywhere. It's a very simple question, but a very powerful question. If you think of it, economic power, resource curse, to have a clean image. It does increase the credibility of business, branding, good. Why should corporates care about CSR? The answer to both of these questions come from the same school of thought. Why should corporates care about CSR? They paid their taxes, they made their profit, they're leading a good life. How does it matter? Reduce inequalities, religious driven. Okay, right. Concept of stewardship, maybe trusteeship also. Make a good image, consumers in a way. So let's look at it on multiple levels. If that rich industrialist in the UK wants to spend millions of dollars to solve, let us say, a health problem in a sub-Saharan country, one reason could be that the country that he is in does not require that kind of heavy investment to make things better. Let's start with that first. Why not solve your own country problem? Because developed countries would not have such severe problems that would require such severe resources. America doesn't have a malaria problem, right? Per se. Is that correct? Okay, that's the first part. Second part, that rich person who has been very successful in life has been able to be rich and successful because of being born in a country with some degree of privilege. You've been able to go to good schools and good colleges and good universities, and be born in a good family, in a good society, breathe clean air, drink clean water, eat clean food. So you've been born to privilege in that manner, assuming these basic things are privilege. So it is a question of opportunity. You cannot expect students to, or children or generations to do well when they're fighting for most basic rights of survival. So that's the second reason. The third would be, it helps you understand the essence of globalization, which is also globalization in a very different context. If human efforts are globalized, that's also still globalization in some manner. Not the I understand the core definition of globalization is impacting Western cultures and all of that. I get that, or the world becoming more interconnected. But if we were not in a globalized world, these global concerns of local development would have not arisen. You would have not understood or known the problems of the lesser privileged part of the world. Good. Fourth could be, if these companies, these organizations are able to reach out to different parts of the world, they truly are multinational in their own right. If they're operating in multiple parts of the world, then they should also be able to help multiple parts of the world. It is commensurate to their global presence. Next reason could be, as all of you said, branding. It could be, to have better positioning. Sometimes this also could be done to influence sentiment in that local area. That local area could be a country. It also could be to influence sentiment, right? So the development sector in the world today is increasingly complex. And all of this also brings in expertise in local development to conduct path breaking research, to conduct, you know, solutions that are scalable. You would remember a few years ago when one of the Indians got a Nobel Prize for economics along with his wife. They worked at the JPAL Institute in Massachusetts, which is Zameen Poverty Action Labs. It's a global think tank receiving funds from all across the world to really look at understanding and solving poverty. It's not as simple as it is. So those aspects also tend to play a very important role, right? Good. So addressing poverty, public health, gender equity, climate, these international donors or charities, they're able to resource, they're able to channel their resources, they're able to channel their knowledge, their influence to uplift vulnerable communities and to actually support domestic governance across borders. And this is not as much about generosity as much as it is about global responsibility. And while they're fundamentally financing, they should not be looked as just financiers. While they're fundamentally financing, their role should not just be looked as financiers. So when we are referring to international donors, we are generally understanding the non-institutional kind, right? So a non-institutional kind would be a non-UN kind. Can you call UN an international donor agency? No. Can you call the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation an international donor? Yes. Because the UN is not just a donor. UN is more of a facilitator, it's more of a doer on ground. I'll have a look there. Clear? So, who are these international donors? And this has largely been in the news since last year because, uh, uh, donor agencies. So, stuff like US aid, which was, their functions were put at a halt suddenly because of their alleged role in influencing elections and stuff like that. But they've been in the news. So, international donors is a very, very open ended line. The entirety of the UN is not a donor, but maybe some parts of it is. So, is World Bank a UN agency? Yes or no? The World Bank is a UN agency, yes. And does the World Bank give funds? So while the UN might not be a donor per se, World Bank is. So the lines are fairly blurred. So when I look at international donors, there are largely of three types. First, you've got your multilateral international donors, World Bank, UN, Asian Development Bank, stuff like that. Then you have your bilateral donors, donor agencies from a specific country. So, US aid, Germany would have something called GIZ. UK has a Forum for Commonwealth Integration Office, FCIO, or Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. Yes. So I think that's a very crude way to look at it, but yes, it could sometimes be done government to government also, or it could sometimes be like how, for example, India has a credit line um, for Nepal. So are we donating? Yes. So BD is bilateral donors. And then you have private philanthropic organizations or private donors. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation. These are generally called private philanthropic organizations. Right? Good. Now, what is it that they actually do? Simplest way of understanding it. What is it that they do? You could say so. In the larger line of things, Abhinandan, yes, you could say so. Of course. Of course, if the meaning of an international donor is somebody paying money to somebody for a development purpose and not asking it back, then that qualifies. So, what is it that they do? If you're effectively a developmental financer, the first thing that you would do is probably give grants. Now, you can give grants to NGOs also, you can give grants to government projects also. So, for example, a lot of the, at least a good chunk of money in our high school, in our school education program, comes as a grant from the World Bank. We used to previously spend that money on building school infrastructure. Now we spend that money mostly on teacher infrastructure. Now, of course, it is all called the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. But back in the day when the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan was separately run, a large chunk of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan used to come be funded by the World Bank. Right? So these grants can be given to NGOs also and can be given to governments also. At the same time, you can look at very low interest loans, or you could look at some form of developmental financing, which means that you will give a country a loan at a negligible rate, or you're giving a country of interest free loan to, let's say, build their metro, and the country has to share the revenue that they make from the metro with you for some time until a portion is met. These are all different models. So loans or any form of developmental, assistance. Then you can also see in very various ways. You will see a lot of times material aid. Now, material aid means you're not giving money, you're giving goods which you purchase. Yes, not PIL, PL 480 side, something, not PIL, PL 480. So, grains, to COVID assistance, to, some kind of health kits, to food. So, we had the Darfur food crisis back in the day. India also sent some. For example, we've given a lot of material aid to Afghanistan also as the country. So, material aid is one aspect. Yes, good. A lot of times you would be spending very heavily on capacity building, large scale infrastructure, very large scale infrastructure, bringing a parliament, bringing in, technical expertise. Yes, we built dams and parliaments in Afghanistan. Good. Sometimes what we don't have, the world has, is technical assistance. So knowledge transfer. Like most of our defense deals with Israel include an element of technology transfer. That not only will we import, we'll also know how to make it. This is fundamentally the difference between our defense deals with, say, dominantly US or Russia. Most of our defense deals with Israel generally come with the technology transfer clause, right? Good. So those technicalities. Yeah, sharing research also. And sometimes very innovatively, they just look at philanthropy or crowdfunding. But broadly, these are your methods. Now, let's also understand if this has worked or not. If all of these things have really helped build a sustainable and a better world. Now, international donors today come with certain distinct advantages: finance, technology, network, influence, connections, call it whatever. Today, in development, humanitarian aid, in assisting in governance reforms, climate resilience, whatever it is, international donors have played a very important role. Their impact is substantial, but it is also complex at the same time, and in rare cases, also slightly controversial. So, to say international donors have just done good for the world would be incorrect. You will see most of these international donors will frame their cooperation along sustainable development goals. You will see most of them would work generally on, say, poverty, health, education, inclusive growth. Yes, they're largely SDG driven. So, international donors will generally have a threefold set of objectives. One is to develop, second is to have geopolitical influence. Soft power is a concept that we use in IR where you go beyond the traditional tools of influence in diplomacy. You go beyond military and economic influence. You look at how culture, industry of a country is impacted so much that it has impacted relations. So foreign aid is in fact a tool of soft power. If it is a country to country donation or it's by the permission, then donor countries will often tie aid to diplomatic, trade, military sort of interests. Pakistan can't dare go against the US for the amount of money that they receive or have received. So, for example, US aid in Middle East, China's Belt and Road Initiative, when EU puts conditionalities on migration, these are all donor aspects. And there are also moral and very humanitarian reasons why you do this. In times of disasters, in times of conflicts, in times of pandemics, international donors will provide that kind of emergency relief, will provide that kind of recovery, which is largely based on humanitarian principles. So if you look at the impacts, say, let's say, if you look at health, for example, USAID, Gavi, Global Fund, today, globally, instances of malaria, HIV, maternal mortality are lesser in Africa and South Asia because of these development funds. UNDP, DFID, they've supported electoral reforms like RTI, e-governance. Why do you hear of UNDP reports on civil services reforms? Because they assist. UNICEF, GFE, GP, Global Partnership in Education, they've worked heavily on gender parity in schools. This is something that you've been asked so many times in the prelims. The Green Climate Fund. The Green Climate Fund is effectively a donor agency. Then, so Green Climate, NORAD, they all support climate adaptation projects. They look at renewable energy in vulnerable nations. So there is so much that has been done and can be done. Now, there are five basic simple problems with all of this. Okay. The first is there are no free lunches, which basically means donor conditions. Simply put, donor conditions. In economics, you would study about structural adjustment problems of the IMF and the World Bank, right? Especially in the 1980s, 1990s, they've pushed for a lot of austerity, a lot of privatization. It has often worsened inequality. It has also, you know, yes, led to, in a way, undermining public services. Are you all aware of the structural adjustment programs? Economics में थोड़ा सा पढ़ा है. This used to happen in the 1980s, 1990s. Good. Basically, economic policies which were, in fact, in a lot of economic policy which were imposed by the IMF and World Bank as conditions for loans to developing countries, right? And the conditions were generally the same. Government should spend less, you should privatize, you should liberalize, your currency has to be devalued so that exports could be promoted, and you should have an export oriented sort of, yes, reform. We are a victim of this, by the way. It comes with a lot of social costs. It's come with a lot of sovereignty problems. It comes with some degree of, it may not work in of inapplicability, but such is the case. Two, there is a lot of fragmentation and duplication. Multiple donors work independently and can create redundant efforts. There would be a larger administrative burden, and then there would be competition amongst recipients who's going to get what aid in what form. This is called aid fragmentation. Imagine if there are five international agencies, all of them are working on improving girl enrollment in schools. After a point, it is going to become redundant. Third, limited local outcome. See, a lot of these projects are designed externally. They have no idea what actual local circumstances are. So, a lot of times, the projects that are made don't work for a long time. Take a simple example, TB programs. Whatever aid and support and projects you want to build for elimination of tuberculosis in India, you have to first solve the problem of people coming to a doctor for TB, or you being able to screen for TB. Do we still today have a mass TB screening program? You come to the hospital, you have TB, you'll get treatment. But we don't have a mass TB screening program. Yes, a very large problem is the diagnosis one. Because it's generally assumed that you will have a feeling that you have TB. That's not how it works. A lot of times there is transactional aid, that why don't you buy a bunch of aircrafts that we built, and in return we're going to give you XYZ dollars in aid. Clear? And a lot of this is fundamentally risky, because a lot of times you will see, because of political transitions, sudden withdrawal happens. What if the government comes and cuts the program? And it's generally seen in very, very fragile states like South Sudan or even Afghanistan for that matter. And we've seen the good and bad both. The India Ford Foundation, 1970s onwards, the India Ford Foundation has had an influence on land reforms, civil society, rural education. It has also been criticized for a certain ideological influence. It has also been criticized for how it has funded local NGOs to do what they were supposed to do. The IMF in Ghana, Zambia also, 1980s, 1990s, they promoted structural reforms. While the macroeconomic indicators of Ghana and Zambia improved, they came with those structural adjustment programs. So governments of Ghana and Zambia had to cut down welfare costs. It hurt the poorest of the poor. Are we clear on this? In COVID, you would have heard of something called COVAX, Gavi and COVAX. They helped in ensuring more people got vaccines. But in low income countries, it was still a problem because of patent issues, production issues, because of geopolitical problems. Right? So, what are your general reforms and your solutions and emerging trends and so on and so forth? Today, you would hear of something called, one second. Today you would hear of something called South-South cooperation. So donors like India, China, Brazil, they are offering developmental assistance without, the kind of terms and conditions that the Western world came with. There is also a concept of localization. See, you have to think about what is happening. X is paying money to Y. X is international, so problems of international. What has been done? Money is being paid. To whom? Why? Why is what? Underdeveloped. So all issues of underdeveloped conflicting with all issues of developed. That's how you generate your arguments. Clear? Effectively यही हो रहा है ना? Yes. So instead of funding larger governments, start funding community-led initiatives, local NGOs, local governments to see greater results. Speaking of results, aid should be result based also. Aid should be result based. Pilot project is a short term one. If you're making cash transfers or you're making any form of aid, there has to be some measurable outcome that we're giving you this much money to see if these are the improvements and outcomes. right? And today, we have to ensure that there is a shift in the focus towards climate finance. Everything that you do should always have an environmental angle to it, right? So, the work that has been done is phenomenal, but at the same time, there is so much scope of things to become better. And then you have some general points like there should be gender transparency with NGOs, compliance with laws, the way you're partnering should be very, very innovative. You should use technology, use blockchain to deliver, you know, aid in refugees. South-South cooperation. Are we clear on this? Now, how do you brainstorm this for the mains exam? If my larger question is the role of an international donor or a charity in development, now break it down. International donor would generally come from the developed part of the world, would largely want to fund on the basis of an issue in the developing part of the world. Yes. Then you further break down. So, developed part of the world would mean this is globalization, this is the Western world, there could be influence, it could be government or the private sector. Fund could be monetary, could be technical, could be a combination of both. Issues can be climate, social, gender, whatever. And here you are funding governments, agencies, non-profits, etc. एक सीधा simple तरीका बता रहा हूँ. The idea is not to apply blind templates. The idea is to be able to think हो क्या रहा है. कोई कहीं से किसी रीजन की वजह से किसी को पैसा दे रहे हैं. अब उसी का मेरा प्लस माइनस करने की अच्छा ऐसा है तो ऐसा क्यों है. प्रॉब्लम बेसिकली तो यही है ना. दिस इज क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग. Clear? Because the kind of questions that are coming nowadays, your standard application of templates does not work, except for a few standard questions here or there. They don't work. Your ability is to think of the problem very specifically because the questions are very specific. Right? All that you have to do is think on a basic what, where, when, how approach. Why do I need international aid? Who's doing international aid? Why are they doing it? To whom are they giving it? How are they giving it? Pick them up, break them down, you have your points. Simple. Don't complicate it. Clear? Because complicated strategies are effectively marketing gimmicks, to be very honest. It makes you think that you are not able to do this, so you would require some hardened approach to do this. It's something that is fundamentally missing. So you need to, really get that help. No, this is an exam for the country. Correct. It's very easy for me to put this into a fancy template or to say I have got these, formats ready. No. At the end of the day, this is what is happening. Clear? Build information. From information, you can always think of where to paste it. Okay? Make sense? Good. Yes. Badhiya. By today you will have all your, I've done them. They're just getting formatted. I've finished all the over the weekend. I finished all your pending notes. Your IR lectures will also be available from today itself. So I've done like a full series of exhaustive. I have lectures, recorded them all of last week, finished them up completely. So that will also be there, because IR has to be done in two parts. One is to just build a foundation so that you get your basics right, but then what is actually asked in the mains is what happens between now and the mains. Anything that has happened till now in IR is largely irrelevant for IR. Yeah, yeah, PCN is enough for the prelims. Absolutely. Clear? There are tags. So there is something called, so Abhinandan, there's a status called IO status, an international organization status. Okay. That status is given to an organization. यहीं पे this status is given to an organization on the basis of cabinet and parliamentary approval. Okay. So for example, UN is an international organization. Now if UN is an international organization, you'll have them in the morning tomorrow. Yeah, by the evening or early morning. Yes. Okay. I've done them because they're theory lectures. IRCA will be relevant only from now onwards. So UN is effectively an IO. Now, if UN is an IO, which means UN organizations should not be paying tax. Core UN employees do not, foreign employees working for the UN in India should not be paying tax. That is because the parliament has given the UN that approval, that exemption. Okay. So Sarthaka, when he was created a repository for all the classes, and no, we've got 3, 4 live classes. Yeah, we've got social justice left. Yeah, okay. And if you guys want, I can very happily to do IR live also for you if you want. So I'll push the. I'll give you IR live also, no problem at all. If you guys want IR live, then very happy to. Then we'll take 3, 4 classes more, but longer classes. Happy to, absolutely. Done. Your wish is thy command. All the preliminaries done. Arey, no problem. No problem. One second. Before I forget, of course, live it is. No problem. The services thing, yeah. Section 17 and section 19. Oh, this was in the newspaper also, no? Sanskriti a couple of days ago. Yeah. So section 19 is about prior sanction from the appropriate government before prosecuting a civil servant in a court of law, as it is written in the this thing. Yes, 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 yes. Now, basically, if there's a civil servant against whom a corruption case has to be prosecuted, if you will prosecute them for a corruption problem, you require prior consent under section 19. Now, a lot of times corruption is not intentional. Decisions can go wrong. For example, if you've chosen X person to be given the tender to, with no bad faith, you've not taken a penny, that person to whom the tender went, the construction was faulty, now there's suddenly a corruption problem. So in that case, officers become very, very, you know, resistant in taking decisions that are required to be, fierce decisions. They have to be on the front of it decisions, right? So to solve this, in section 19, we have section 17A. Now, what section 17A does is, section 17A counters the effect of section 19. Now, under section 17A, you will require prior sanction from the senior authority or appropriate government for even starting an inquiry. Prosecution is going to court. For even starting an inquiry into any corruption case that may have even, to any corruption issue that may even be there, okay, which is in relation to anything that you've done in the course of your duty. Understand this? No, so under section 17A, your job as the collector is to award a contract to get uniforms stitched under RTE for children. Okay. Now, the person that you've given the contract to tomorrow turns out that makes bad quality uniforms and children have skin rashes. Could it be a corruption issue? Yes. So what happens is that you would be very reluctant in awarding that contract. You will send it to the higher education ministry of the state to go figure it out, because of which there will be a delay. So section 19 is a prior sanction to file a case in the court, to file a charge sheet in court. Section 17 is to even begin inquiry. Do we understand the difference? Yes or no? Good. Partially also about influencer peddlers, but not so much. ठीक. Nonetheless, you guys would like some live IR classes. We'll take about 3-4 of them this week, 4-5 of them, and get your basics ready. Is that okay? Yes, done. Of course. Here, a lot of you are finding it difficult to get the notes from the Telegram channel. Please, this is a drive link that I have created. All my notes, comprehensive and concise of all subjects, are right here. Directly download them. Okay? Clear? Works? Just check once if you're able to open the drive. All here in one place. So comprehensive notes, concise notes, simple as that. Okay, good enough. Works? Good. Okay, so let's do NGOs, SHGs. I I think a week, 10 days more. Feb. Chalo. See, done. I'll get the IR classes also set up. Bye. Shreya, I'll check your WhatsApp also. Bye.